Welcome to People Doing Good for Others, where we celebrate and praise and honor those community advocates who are truly making a difference in the lives of others. I'm Gary York, and I'm grateful to be here. We want to thank Wilkes Communications, River Street Productions, and 100.9 WIFM for this opportunity. My honored guest is David Johnson. He's a Wilkes County native and legend, a person who truly is the heart and soul of this community, and I'm so glad you're here, my friend.
Glad to be here, buddy.
And you've shared with me that music was something about 6 years old and a mandolin that you kicked around in the sandbox.
Yeah.
So tell us about that influence of family and that music was a way of life, David Johnson.
Well, music it's the first thing I remember hearing, as much as I remember hearing my mother and father's voice. The earliest memories I have are of a red plastic Zenith radio at the foot of the bed. And this was sometime, I guess, between 2 and 3, and people say you can't remember that far back. I remember that, and I remember the music playing on that thing. I would wake up in the mornings, and my mother, who got up very early to get my father off to work, would have that radio going. And they all played live music anyway, because both sides of my family, my mother and my father's family, played live radio in the 40s and early 50s. And so they rehearsed at home. I heard musicians. I met musicians when I was tiny. And I just wanted to do that. I just wanted to be a part of it. It's like you follow your father in whatever he does for a living or for a hobby, and you want to do what Dad does or what Mom does. And I wanted to play music. And so, excuse me, they wouldn't give me high dollar instruments to play, but they would let me play something. And he gave me a mandolin, an old K mandolin that was beaten up and busted and barely could get strings on it. And I drug this thing around. I played with it in the sandbox. I did everything with it, but I would try to play it. And he would tune it up to an open chord to where it sounded pretty good until I beat it out of tune. And I'd beat on that thing, and I loved doing that. And I'd watch him, and I'd watch the TV, and I just wanted to learn to do it better. And so he finally, and my family finally, started showing me some positions to play on guitar and on the mandolin. And I remember one night I was working so hard to try to get a guitar chord. I was, I guess, 4 or 5. And I was in the bedroom, and I was working with it, and I finally got all those fingers up on the neck where it was supposed to be, and I carried the whole guitar in there and stood in front of them, and I went, bam, so they could see this chord. And I guess they took pity on me, and they figured, well, if he's going to learn one thing, we'll show him some more. So they started giving me some instruction on guitar, and my dad eventually got me a guitar, and I would play music with him at that time.
You brought a relic.
This is a banjo.
A banjo. Tell us about it.
My grandfather was a banjo player, and he was also a carpenter and a builder, and he worked at Home Chair Company in North Wilkesboro back in the 30s. My understanding is in 1931, he built this banjo using some of the tools down there, and it was called a box banjo because all it was essentially was a box with a neck. There are no frets or position markers in it. It's not strung up right now or not in playable condition, but originally, it had a groundhog hide head in it. This is calf skin. This is one that was put in it later. But he played this, and he played it for my father when my dad was a year or 2 old. And it was laying up at the house, and when I was learning to play guitar, I got to looking at that banjo, and I said, Pa, can you play me that thing? And he strung it up, and he played it, and he played in the old claw hammer style. Right. And I was used to seeing Earl Scruggs and these guys play the fancy three-fingered picking, the bluegrass picking, and I was wanting to try to learn that. He got me interested in the claw hammer, and so I learned to play banjo playing on this instrument. I wore out 2 places in the neck there trying to play Cripple Creek and a couple other songs. And this was the banjo I learned to play on. And I just...
1931?
31 was the year he told me. My dad was a year old. So that would, if Home Chair Company was here in 31 and his memory's serving him right, then that was when that was built.
Oh, thank you very much.
He built several of those over the years.
When were you good enough to be in a band? 10 years
Well,
old? Or?
yeah, my father, as I say, played live radio, and this was a business venture for them because, as it is for most regional players, because they would do the radio show essentially for nothing. And there were 2 radio stations here at that time broadcasting the country music or the hillbilly music of the day, hillbilly being a good term.
Right.
So I can't remember the call. It seemed like it was WLIX or ILX of the other station other than WKBC at that time. But this was in the 40s. And they played there weekly, and they could book personal appearances from the popularity of being on the show. And there were several bands that did this in the area. So my father's part-time job was playing music. Well, in the early 60s, he and 2 other neighbor fellows up there that were good musicians, Allie Goforth and Jim Bryant, formed a square dance band because there was a square dance craze. It was one of these fads that came through the country, and every civic club for 100 miles around had a square dance going on weekly. Fundraisers used it to raise money for schools, used it to raise money for civic clubs, for community centers. Yeah. There was a community center in Maple Springs community at that time. They were trying to add a wing on to make it a little bit bigger and serve the community a little better. So they had a weekly square dance. There was another one at Darby, up in the mountains up there. So the square dance bands played there, and my father's band played there quite a bit. There's a huge one that's been in North Wilkesboro forever, since the 50s, the VFW square dance. It serves the same purpose. That's what it did. So my father said, we need a banjo player in this square dance band because he played some fiddle. And he said, would you like to play banjo with us? I'll pay you to do it. And I said, okay. Because I like to have a few dollars, you know. A kid in the 60s, you had to bag groceries or carry brick or whatever you did to mow yards. And I like playing music better than all them things, so I started playing with him. And I remember the first night we got paid, if I remember the amount right, I think we made $2.25 a piece. Well, in 1963 or 4, whenever that was, $2.25 would buy a whole lot of candy bars.
Right.
And so it went from there to $5 a night, $10 a night. It progressed, and it got to where it was a nice little part-time job. And I played with him for 4 years, right, and loved it. Absolutely loved it. I learned a bunch of music.
Then you had a major breakthrough to go to Taylorsville and help some people down there.
I did. There was Holly Farms was here, just the big thing here, Holly Farms and Lowe's. And Holly Farms hired a producer out of Hollywood, California, named Les Blank, to do a film history of their company. And they needed some regional music to do the soundtrack with. They wanted local players playing local music for that film. And a good friend of ours that played fiddle at the V down here, the VFW, Drake Waltz, Drake said, boys, I think I can get us on that film and we can get paid for it. Would you go do it? So Drake and my father and a gentleman named Marshall Craven, great bass player, and a studio owner eventually, by the way, they went, and we went to a studio in Taylorsville called Galaxy 3 Recording. Harry Deal, who had Harry Deal and the Galaxies, Beach and Top 40 band, regional favorites, you know. They had just built this studio. This was in '69. I was 15. And they paid us at the end of the night. We cut 18 old fiddle and banjo tunes, and they paid us $65 a piece. And I thought the world was coming to an end because I'd never made that much money doing anything in a sitting. And I said, this has got some potential. This is what I want to do. Well, I was 15. I was thinking about, I want a car.
Yeah.
I want, a few dollars in my pocket. And it wasn't just entrepreneurial. I would have paid them to let me play. But the fact that they would pay me, that was okay. That was okay. So I started working for Harry after school. My dad would take me over there. He eventually formed a school of music there. He was an entrepreneur's entrepreneur, and he did anything concerning music. And they had a school of music that had no rival for a while. They had nearly 300 students, dance students, piano students, voice students, but they wanted somebody to teach stringed instruments.
Right.
And he said, Dave, I'll pay you to do that. Do you know how to do it? And I said, no. Well, he said, well, here's a room, there's a record player, and here's a few sheets of paper, and I'll get you some students, and you figure it out. And I said, okay. So I started teaching, and that blossomed eventually into teaching over 1,000 people over a period of about 10 years.
David Johnson, you're such an honor to have you with us today.
Glad to be here.
The magic that comes from a group that comes together, that synergy, that bonding, share with our folks today, how's that happen?
Well, a part of it begins with people that can get along with each other. Friendships are struck up in many ways, but when you're playing music and you find that you have a common musical background with someone else, that gosh, I like these songs, or I like this type playing, I like this kind of instrumentation. Musicians will clump together because of common musical likes. And then those that are lucky enough to find players that not only they share the musical background with, but they share other things. They share maybe a look on life, maybe the same philosophies, not just musical philosophies, but they find that they have a lot of things in common. If you can sit down and drink a cup of coffee with somebody, or have a meal with somebody, and have a civil relationship for 15 minutes, then if you have a common musical background, you have the makings of a band right there.
And you also, reading music is, you just do it by ear. Sarah, how does that work?
I read slowly. It is my one huge regret in music that I didn't take formal music lessons. And at the time when I was growing up, I didn't see the need for it. My folks offered for me to take classical piano. I wish I had. But at the same time, the music that I learned to work with and to work for other people doing was a music that was passed down from one generation to another, or from one musical friend to another. And you learned it by watching, and you learned it most of all by listening and appreciating what was being done, learning how to copy what you're seeing and hearing, and then putting your own touch on it. And that's music by ear, because it's something you learn watching somebody else do it, just like laying a brick, painting a picture, whatever. It's by example. Now, we read, we read in recording sessions, which is what I do for a living now. We read what's called the Nashville number system. Sometimes it's just called number charts. And the numbers stand for chord changes within the song. And you have to be able to read that to get a session job, regardless of what venue you work. But reading manuscript music is something that I have had to make myself learn to do over the years. And I have the utmost respect for people that are good readers, because it's a discipline that's very necessary. I would tell every young person that's thinking about any kind of career in music, learn to read and learn to read well.
And you told me you also will have a title of sideman or utility man. You play 13 different instruments when you go to a session. Tell us about that.
I think I was the inventor of ADD. I wanted to play all the instruments that I saw come to my house. When I saw a band, I didn't just fantasize about being the guitar player or the banjo player or the drummer. I wanted to make all those sounds. I wanted to be able to make all those sounds. And so I dabbled with it. And my folks would get me whatever kind of instrument I asked for. I had people warn me that if you don't concentrate on one thing, you'll never be any good at anything. And I take issue with that, because I think they're all related. And so when I got into the recording work, we got paid. Back in those days, there was no union here like there is in Nashville. And in those days in North Carolina, we got paid pretty much by our worth to the track. In other words, the more you could add to a session, the more in demand you might be. Well, I knew how to play 4 or 5 things from learning from my folks and from other people, and I could get around on them pretty well. So when I started going to sessions, I was playing primarily a steel guitar. There were not that many steel guitar players, and my father had built me a steel, and I had learned to play from locals like Paul Snodgrass and Cliff Miller, and Jim Bryant was a steel player, all these folks around. And so that was popular in the sessions. But then somebody asked one day, Dave, do you play anything else? And I said, well, yeah, I got some other stuff I can bring. So I started carrying everything that I knew how to play to the sessions, and they would pay you more for that. So the more instruments you played, you become what's called a utility musician.
Utility.
And you're like a toolbox, and people go to you as a toolbox and say, we need this on this song, that on that song, and the producers tell you what they want on a track. It's still that way today. I do it online.
Your work today is 80% of it is recording Southern gospel.
Tremendous amount of Southern gospel. By definition, Southern gospel was southeastern United States. The industry was born here. And the publishers of the music were centered around Tennessee and North Carolina. And so the groups that sprang up did all kinds of music within the Southern gospel frame. Some of it sounded like bluegrass. Some of it sounded like piano music and male quartet or mixed quartet. And some of it, in the 60s and 70s, it was like a country band. Steel guitar, fiddle, electric guitar, drums, piano, with a quartet singing. So those recording sessions required a lot of musicians. And like I say, there wasn't a real union here at the time. So you tried to book players on the sessions that could play several instruments and several different styles of music. So I listened to a lot of different things. I listened to Western swing. I grew up playing bluegrass and country music. I listened to Southern gospel music. I listened to a little more classical. Sometimes the ballads, they want you to sound really uptown, and you may just be doing a pretty brush guitar or something, and they want all these fancy chords and things, and they want it to sound like it was cut in New York. You had to learn all these things, and you had to bring that skill set to the sessions. And it was exciting because you're constantly in a learning state.
So that versatility was a real calling for you. That you could do a lot of things. That had to make you feel.
It was wonderful. No 2 days are the same in that business. You may cut one particular type of music. It's like the last 2 weeks. The sessions I've been in have been primarily Christmas songs. I'm leaving for the coast today and doing a Christmas session tonight, tomorrow. Friday's sessions, I think, are all acoustic. They're like bluegrass music, fiddles and banjos and dobro. There's never time to get bored.
You're a man of great faith. Share that.
I was raised in the Methodist church over the hill from my house because that's where my great-great-grandfather was one of the first pastors. My family was Christian by nature and raised in that same church. I was raised in the church environment, and then like the recording thing, when I got into the music, tremendous amount of it was Southern gospel. I had scripture going in one ear and coming out the other. I never had a time that I didn't believe something about Christ. I believed he existed. You question when you're a child sometimes. If you're a teenager and you're getting a little rowdy, you question things. But I don't think I ever totally departed from believing. But I had never come to a relationship with him, with the Lord through Christ. And I knew there was something missing. I was happy with my life. I married a wonderful girl. She's a musician too. I married Ann. I had a son. But in my 40s, I found myself in church acting the part of a Christian that I knew I wasn't. Acting the part. I can act the part pretty good. You do that when you play. But I knew something was missing. And it became a misery. And so I had left a recording session one evening, and I stopped on the side of the road. As a matter of fact, I was in Lenore, and it was raining so hard And I had to get this fought out. And I just stopped on the side of the road and I said, Lord, whatever is wrong with me, whatever I haven't done, whatever I need to do to be right with you, I can't fix it. And I realize that now. And I can't go on from here until you fix it. And so please, fix me, save me, change me, do whatever it is you've got to do to me that I can leave here and be at least on a new path with you. And it was not this bolt of lightning. It was this quiet inner satisfaction. It's a struggle. It's still a struggle every day. We are sinful creatures. But things opened up, Scripture opened up, opportunities to witness to people opened up. And I was always a little scared if I came totally clean with God, if I said, Lord, I'm yours, take me, what would he ask me to give up? And you know, I think inside I might have been afraid he might ask me to give up my playing or something. Dave, I want you to go to the mission field or, you know, whatever. It only enhanced it. As a matter of fact, that part about your cup running over in Psalm 23, he's poured more into my cup. If I had 10 cups, I couldn't. I've had plenty of work. He has maintained my hands. I survived a car wreck. I'm still able to serve my community, serve my family, to maintain a living. And sometimes you don't. I watched my father-in-law, who's a victim of a stroke, and he can't move his hands much anymore. But the Lord has put me wherever he's put me, and while he does what he does for me, I just need to serve him.
Dixie Dawn.
Dixie Dawn was an outgrowth of two orphans. A good friend of mine, who's in this business, by the way, Darrell Bryant. Darrell Bryant and I we knew each other. He was from Yadkin County. He was a bluegrass musician, but he was dabbling in some country music, and he'd put a band together, and the band was falling apart. Well, the band I had played with for a long time was slowing down, and these guys were wanting to quit or let up for a while, and I was out of the band. And Darrell was too, and we were sitting talking about it one day, and he said, well, since we're both orphans, let's go ahead and see what we can do together. And we had common, like I said a while ago, we had common musical relationships, and we were also good buddies. And so I said, well, let's play some music. And in less than a year, we'd hired a couple other friends of ours. Anthony McNeil was playing drums. J.C. Wagner, who clogged on roller skates at that time, by the way, was playing bass with us and doing his clogging routine. And we put this band together that was part rock and roll, part hillbilly, part country, part bluegrass, and all a bunch of fun.
A bunch of fun.
And we went up and down the road in a Greyhound bus over the East Coast for 7 years. We still have the band. Everybody's moved away. Some of us have gotten older, some of us. But we still play a few gigs each year so we can see each other. We even play some churches together. We do some gospel now.
Merle Fest.
Merle Fest was only supposed to happen one time. It was to honor Doc and the whole thing with him and Merle and his contributions. And so Bill Young, who was a friend of mine and one of the co-founders of it with B. Towns and the college, I played with him there. He was a guitar player, and we played the first one. There was a couple of thousand people at the first one, and only 2 stages, one at the Walker Center and one down in front of the What's Old Cabin now. We played for the next, I think, 19 years. We would open it on Thursdays a lot. Dixie Dawn, myself, my father, who was still able to get on stage and play a little bit, and we finally rested up from it. But I think we played it 19 years. It was a lot of fun and
Doc
great
Roxon,
for the community.
Tell us a little about your personal
Well,
relationship with Doc.
Doc was one of those, we were in awe of him because what he had done in his music. At the same time, Doc was a musical neighbor. He was 20 minutes up the road. And that's the odd thing about particularly bluegrass and acoustic musicians. They look at each other as neighbors. If they live close together, the star thing doesn't affect you as much as being in awe of their playing because you knew them before they were that way. But Doc was so nice, and he would do some gigs and use me and Bill Young and a couple of fellas, and it was great for us because we loved playing with him and playing for him. He would come to the house periodically and rehearse, just the most humble of people.
Yeah. Were you gonna, something about that fiddle? It's not,
This is not in playing condition. This was built in Germany sometime in the 1800s by Richard Meyerhoff. A neighbor of my great-grandfather's brought this back from World War I, gave $5 for it, which was a bunch of money in World War I. Brought it back from over there, and my dad cut a fit for it when he was a teenager. And he and my grandfather used to cut firewood for people. They had an old A model with a saw on the back of it, and he said they sawed 9 cord of firewood. That's a lot of firewood for those that don't know how much a cord is. And got the fiddle, traded the woodwork for the fiddle. Dad gave it to me when or put it in my hands when I was 7 or 8. I wanted him to string it up, and I wanted to try to play it. He said, if you learn to play that, I'll give you $100. And I scraped and sawed around on it until I got to where I could fiddle through a song. And I went to him and, I wanted the payment. And what he wound up giving me, he didn't have $100 he could do that with, but he gave me the fiddle. And to tell you the truth, I would much rather have had the fiddle.
yeah. David Johnson, you have honored us so many different ways today, and you share your passion, you share your love. You
Wish
share
everybody could feel
your
it.
community, and you just it's just a blessing to have you here, and you bring us great joy. And
It's
so
a blessing to live here.
let me thank Wilkes Communications and also River Street Productions and WIFM, and carry it to the end
Okay.
with your specialty. And
Yeah.
we want to see and hear what is it that you do, David Johnson.
Well, I'll do a couple songs. These are radically different. We'll do one from the gospel realm to begin with. Everybody should know this, and then we might do a little hoedown.
Johnson sharing his experience and his hope and his faith and his love for Wilkes County and this community. We thank you. God bless you.
God bless you, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you.